So it's my pleasure to speak about the student internships experience at University of Liverpool. And Tom, if you can share the next slide. At University of Liverpool, the mathematics department works for a number of years now with industry data, where undergraduate students work in groups of 5 under the supervision of graduate students, and they simply provide data input, data insights in data sets from companies that are willing to work with us and pose questions that interest them. And why do they work with us and why is it exciting? Because students provide always an untainted point of view. They have fresh eyes. They love to work with real data and to try to answer real questions. This last summer was the first time our own university provided us with a data set. And in addition, they were generous enough to provide us with a software that goes with it. And our students had the chance to work with TM1 and TM1py. I just want to mention that it was unique as well, that this was the first time we conducted these internships remotely, which proved to have some benefits, as in setting easy meetings with Cubewise for students if they had any questions. But of course, missed the vibe in the room that the students get when they work together in a classroom. So among the 10 groups that work this summer, which is usually the number of groups that we have in a normal summer project, 2 groups looked at recruitment, one at recruitment, one at retention. So the questions posed by our strategic planning, our own Philip, that you'll hear from in a minute, were what factor influence decision-making in recruitment, and what actions can we take as a university to improve recruiting the best of students? And also in terms of retention, why are students withdrawing? And again, as a university, what interventions can we make and when? So over to you, Tom, to tell us a bit about what's behind.
Thanks, Karina. So the Cubewise went to the University of Liverpool to develop a TM1 model that used TM1py to enable us to analyze the data that we had on applications and completions. So some of the challenges that we had around the data was the sheer volume of data on applications. There was sort of over 9 million rows of data. That meant it was impossible to sort of view that data without use of a software like TM1 to be able to allow users to analyze and explore the data. So we went about loading the data into 3 different cubes. The applications data which was the students signing up for applying for university places, went into an applications cube. The sort of weekly status of that application, the data went into a weekly applications weekly cube, and the completions data, which was sort of their passage throughout the years of their study at the university, that went into a separate completions cube. What it enabled us to do with TM1 was to use its natural ability to aggregate the data, so that you could provide sort of number of students and metrics on the number of students that applied, and the different attributes to do with those students, like where they came from, what type of background, and that data was summarized in those 3 cubes, and then made available to the students that needed to extract the data with use of TM1py. So our TM1py team used Jupyter notebooks and took the students through how to extract the data from TM1 using TM1py to enable them to do their analysis and then feed their reports that they fed back on the course. So yeah, really interesting use case to be able to see the ability for TM1 to handle like vast amounts of data and how TM1py can connect to that data to help you sort of extract and analyze further. Cool. Okay, that's kind of it on the TM1 model. So back to you, Karina, on student experiences.
Yeah, so I have the opportunity to share what the students thought of TM1 and TM1py, which might be of interest to many other TM1 users. So especially because this was their first time they've seen TM1 and TM1py, and the entire project took 6 weeks. So I asked them their opinions, and it was that it's very easy to use for beginners because the interface is user-friendly. It was really helpful that TM1py has a very comprehensive Python library, which they used for building their model. What they really appreciate and kept telling me a lot, that using TM1, they got cleaner data and the transfer between data sets and reading data was much better than from Excel files. Also, these are second-year students going into third years. You see them in the pictures, the one that that were involved in these 2 projects. They have or have not Python experience coming into the project. So they all were happy that they did not need prior Python experience and knowledge, but they felt inspired to learn Python after using TM1py and seeing all their features and facilities. So overall, this was one of the most excited group with their project, both because the question was meaningful in terms of helping their own university make better decisions, and also because the software they used and the new methods they learned were very new and exciting. So I'm really happy to hear what Niall and Phil had to say about their results. So back to you, or back to Niall.
Thanks, Karina. So I'm going to talk about the first group who looked at student recruitment. So we've asked them to the students to look at what factors influence the decision making of our applicants who are looking to come to the university, and what actions we could possibly take to get involved in the applications process to improve the number of students and the quality of those students who end up coming to Liverpool. We provided the group with 5 years of applications data from 2016 to 2020, so it was well over 100,000 applicants worth of data. So we could be confident that their findings would be robust. We focused on the undergraduate applicants. We did that because in the UK there's a standard application process for undergraduates that all undergraduate applicants have to go through. So we can be confident that the data in that will be high quality and sort of replicable. So we shared with the group all the applicant demographics, so information on where they are from, whether they're from the UK, what part of the UK they were from, what subjects they were studying, what ethnicity they were, if they had any disabilities, all kinds of things like that. For their information, we also shared with them that standard application and decision process that every applicant to a UK university goes through. And we also gave them our competitor win-loss data. So that's where if an applicant decides not to come to Liverpool, that data tells the students which one of our competitors they end up actually attending. So every year we make tens of thousands of offers to students. Only around 20% of those offer holders actually select Liverpool as their first choice. 13% select us as their second choice, and 67%, so around 2/3 of all offer holders actually decline our offer. So we look at that and we think, you know, that's tens of thousands of high quality applicants who have taken the time to apply to Liverpool, get offered a place at Liverpool, and then decide they don't want to come here. So what can we do to get a nice slice of that 67% pie? Can we go to the next slide, please, Tom? Cheers. So we're just going to go through a few of the factors that the students managed to identify as having an influence. So the first one is the backgrounds of our applicants. So you see this chart on the left-hand side looks at Polar 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Polar is a measure. It's applied to each postcode within the UK. And it's a measure of how many young people in that postcode actually end up going to university. So Polar 1 are those areas in the country where the fewest number of young people end up going into higher education. And we can see there in Polar groups 1 and 2, those low participation areas, students are much more likely to withdraw from the application process. So around 4% of all applicants from those areas end up withdrawing, compared to less than 2% for Polar areas 4 and 5, which are those areas of higher participation. So that's perhaps not surprising, but it's certainly concerning, because we want to make sure that students from these more deprived backgrounds are confident to attend a high quality university. On the right hand side, the students looked at the region. So here, region 1 is the region closest to Liverpool, and region 4 is the region furthest away. And again, we can see, perhaps not surprisingly, but certainly very interesting, that students from regions further away from Liverpool are about 3 times more likely to withdraw from the application process than students from the region close to Liverpool. Interestingly, that intermediate region 2, which is, you know, areas moderately far away from Liverpool, not in the direct city area, but just a bit further away, students were half less likely to withdraw from the process. So only 1.5% of students from region 2 end up withdrawing from the process. Can we go to the next slide, please, Tom? Okay, and the final factor we found really interesting was the time it takes for the university to respond to an applicant's application. So we can see there that if an applicant had a response from us within a week of submitting their application, only 62% of them withdrew, compared to if an applicant had to wait between 15 and 30 days for a response, 74% withdrew. So a big 12% difference just based on how long it takes us to reply to an application. So that's giving us some key insight that the quicker we can reply to an application, the more likely it is that that applicant will end up coming to the University of Liverpool. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a bit of a decision structure that the student interns advised to us. So you can see there they've highlighted some key interventions, some key points at which we could get involved in the application process to try and improve the number of applicants who decide to come to Liverpool. And they put in actions at each of those stages as well. So saying when we receive the students' information, we should classify them by that Polar score and region to see if there's anything we can do to help to make sure students from those critical areas end up coming here. And then when we receive a student's reply, making sure that we make an appropriate offer and make sure that they're aware of scholarships and other options they have available if they come to the University of Liverpool. And that takes us all the way through to registration. So that is really useful for us to look at and to know where we can start making those interventions. And now I'll hand over to Phil.
Thanks, Niall. The other half of this is when we've already got the students. The students have got through. They're the 20% that have come to us. And do we keep them, or do they leak out of us? For this, we looked at 7 years of data, again, undergraduate, as we did with them in Niall's piece. 125 different factors we looked at, including, as with admission, the student demographics, whether they came from low participation neighborhoods or high participation neighborhoods, etc., whether they came in with great qualifications, good qualifications, or where they were coming in with lower qualifications, and also the subjects that they were studying. Were there any particular subjects that had lower or higher rates of retention? One thing that we found out here is that we knew roughly every year 500 students chose not to continue their degree. And that translated in financial terms to a loss in income of of £4.7 million. Now, I know within the last year, we had a surplus of somewhere around 17 million. So gaining some of that 4.7 million back would be incredibly useful for our surplus to reinvest it in areas, for reinvest in areas of the university. So next slide, please, Tom. We looked at 3 different areas, and what you're seeing here is looking at the marks that students get as they go through their 3 terms of the year at various points. When they were more likely to withdraw, you might expect that those students who are failing would withdraw, but at the end of the year. But this is kind of showing that we are getting withdrawals of those that start to fail individual modules as they go through the year are much more likely to withdraw than others. Now, good for the university. Over recent years, that's got better as we've managed to put targeted interventions in place, but it's still showing that behavior. Even those that are just passing are coming up with 3rd class degrees, 3rd class results, they are showing a propensity to withdraw as well. Next slide, please, Tom. The other perception is, what about the age of the students? Most of our students come in at the age of 18. They're directly leaving school, but quite often we get mature students, those that are over 21, and sometimes with them, they don't necessarily have the learning skills or study skills that are as current as those leaving school at 18. And we see this in the data, that perhaps there's a tension there when they come in that leads them not to be able to perform as well, and therefore more likely to withdraw. Maybe they've even got an alternative career option that they wanted to take, but they have a greater propensity to withdraw. So again, this is getting under the skin of that one, and targeting it is one thing that we as a university need to focus on. Next slide, please, Tom. The final aspect, which was what Niall was talking about, what about socioeconomic class, those that come from low participation neighbourhoods? This is, again, we see this as being areas where we are leaking more students than we should do. Yes, we've improved it over recent years, but it's still there as a main driver. And probably the same reasons that apply to those groups not withdrawing, not selecting us as the first choice or not coming to us before they come are still prevalent after we come. Those are the sorts of main perspectives that we got from the study. What we've done with this is we've presented it into a number of our other admissions colleagues within the university. And as you might expect, one of the reasons for doing this is we probably thought that these were the answers we get. We just had never quantified them with such a degree of robustness as we have before. So it was very useful, and our small colleagues were quite taken aback at how we were able to substantiate some of the things, some of the main drivers of these behaviours, so clearly within the data. That draws us to an end. So I'll pass back to Tom, and we'll take any questions that you might have.
Okay, great. Thanks, Phil, Niall and Karina. Yeah, like fascinating to hear some of the results that have come out of that data analysis that the students did. If anyone's got any questions, then put them in the chat now. I've got a question about sort of now that you've seen that, and you've seen the results that come out of being able to use TM1py to allow students to analyze it. Has it sort of sparked any new use cases that you might consider in the future in terms of analysis?
I'll take that if you may. I mean, when we presented this to our admissions colleagues, what we got back was, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Loads of drivers in there that we hadn't put into the original question to our students because we wanted to keep it as simple as possible. So yes, it told our colleagues much what they thought, but in a lot more detail. But it also raised a number of questions that we would try and put into a next set of analysis when we get interns next year. So hopefully we're progressing to a richer and richer understanding of which students come to us, where we can put key interventions, and also how we retain them as well once they get here.
Great. So I've got any more questions coming through at the moment. Thank you all for attending and presenting that. Really fascinating to see like how you can extend TM1 using TM1py and see a real use case of like how it can drive the change in behaviors perhaps going forward.